I always enjoyed quiet weekends in our neighborhood. The houses were neat, the streets were peaceful, and everyone mostly kept to themselves. That changed the morning I noticed construction trucks rolling onto my neighbor Mark Benson's property. At first, I thought Mark was building a small shed or maybe expanding his backyard patio. Construction projects were common enough around here, but as workers unloaded stacks of lumber and heavy equipment, something about the scale of the project immediately caught my attention. Over the next few days, I watched crews mark measurements across Mark's property. Bright survey stakes appeared close to the edge of my driveway. I assumed they knew what they were doing, but the placement seemed unusually close to my property line. One afternoon, I walked outside and noticed fresh concrete being poured. The foundation stretched farther than I expected. Looking at the layout, I couldn't understand why the structure seemed angled toward my driveway instead of Mark's own access path. Construction moved quickly. Within a week, wooden framing rose into the air. The outline of a large garage became visible. Neighbors walking their dogs slowed down to stare at the unusual design taking shape. As more walls went up, the purpose of the structure became clear. The garage wasn't facing Mark's yard. It wasn't facing the street. It appeared to be opening directly toward my private driveway. I stood in my driveway studying the structure for several minutes. The more I looked at it, the less sense it made. There was no practical way to enter the garage without crossing onto my property. Concerned, I approached Mark and politely asked about the project. I pointed toward the garage opening and asked whether there had been some kind of mistake in the design. Mark laughed and assured me everything was fine. His response didn't answer my question. When I asked how vehicles would reach the garage, he simply said it would all work out once construction was finished. That explanation left me more confused than before. Soon, other neighbors started discussing the project. People stopped while walking through the neighborhood and quietly pointed at the garage. Everyone seemed to notice the same problem. As construction neared completion, the issue became impossible to ignore. The garage opening lined up almost perfectly with my driveway. Anyone trying to use it would naturally drive across my property. That evening, I decided to review my property documents. I pulled old records from a filing cabinet and spread them across my dining room table. If there was a misunderstanding, I wanted to understand exactly what was happening. I found my original survey paperwork and carefully studied every measurement. The documents clearly showed that my driveway belonged entirely to my property. There were no shared access agreements or easements. The next day, I contacted the city planning office. I explained the situation and asked whether they could verify the approved construction plans. The staff listened carefully and promised to investigate. A few days later, city employees began reviewing permit records. They compared the submitted documents with aerial maps and property surveys. Their questions suggested that something wasn't adding up. Eventually, the case reached a building inspector named Robert Hayes. After reviewing the file, he scheduled an on-site inspection. Word spread quickly through the neighborhood that an official review was coming. When Inspector Hayes arrived, he immediately began examining the structure. He walked around the property with a clipboard, taking notes and comparing measurements to official documents. The inspector measured distances between the garage and property lines. He carefully documented every detail. Several workers paused their tasks and watched the inspection unfold. After reviewing the blueprints, the inspector spent a long time studying the completed structure. He repeatedly compared the plans to what had actually been built on the site. Mark tried explaining the project and answered several questions. The inspector remained professional and listened carefully. However, his expression suggested that he had concerns. Throughout the inspection, photographs were taken from multiple angles. Notes filled several pages on the clipboard. The process appeared thorough and extremely detailed. Finally, the inspector reached a decision. An official stop work notice was attached to the side of the garage. Construction activities were ordered to stop immediately. The atmosphere changed instantly. Workers packed away tools and equipment. Conversations became quiet as everyone realized the project was now under official review. After the crew left, Mark stood alone beside the unfinished structure. He carefully read the documents provided by the city. The reality of the situation was beginning to sink in. Over the next several days, neighbors discussed the outcome. Most people agreed that construction projects must follow regulations and respect property boundaries, regardless of who owns the land. Surveyors eventually returned to verify every measurement. Using professional equipment, they confirmed the exact location of property lines and access areas. The findings supported the inspector's concerns. Adjustments would be required before construction could continue. The garage could not remain in its current configuration. Several weeks later, revised plans were submitted and approved. Construction resumed under close supervision, with workers making significant changes to the structure. Inspector Hayes returned periodically to review progress. Each modification brought the project closer to meeting local building requirements and property regulations. Eventually, the garage was redesigned so that it no longer depended on access through my driveway. The new layout respected property boundaries and solved the original problem. Standing in my driveway one evening, I looked at the completed changes. The issue had been resolved through proper procedures, documentation, and patience rather than conflict. Life soon returned to normal throughout the neighborhood. The experience became a reminder that even large construction projects must respect property rights and follow the rules. In the end, common sense and proper inspections prevented a much bigger problem from developing. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from?